the Soviet Information Bureau, The Last Hour. Recently, our troops located to the south of Lake Ladoga changed over to the offensive against the German fascist forces, which besieged the city of Leningrad. After a 7-day fight, the troops of the Boltovo and Leningrad fronts lifted the siege of Leningrad on January 18th.
This is Menshikov, the first chief of administration of Petersburg, its builder. He ended up at Berezov in exile. The life of the chiefs of city administration ended up differently. And now we are ascending 15 meters below the Neva level to remember that most dreadful destiny was the destiny of the leaders of the city who served during the siege of Leningrad.
From the memories of the staff of the Shmolny, Zhdanov very rarely appeared in his office in the Shmolny. Most of the time he spent underground, where there was a meeting hall, living rooms for the senior management, and even a gym.
Here is where everything was going on. I see. Yes. Apparently, here was Zhdanov's office, as they told us. Zhdanov was a very significant figure. He was not just a member of the War Council. He was a man who could communicate directly with Stalin. And he could certainly do a lot for the city. What kind of negotiations were going on? But no initiative and no remarkable action on the part of Zhdanov was mentioned either in the memory of the siege victims or in any documents known to me. There was gossip that Zhdanov drank. There was gossip that he ate luxuriously here, that in those times there was fresh fish, fruit, meat, everything was cooked for him specially. I don't know. Apparently, the situation here was absolutely different, in the sense that, evidently, here was communication equipment for communicating with the Stavka. All this is deep underground at the Smolny here. Many negotiations were led from here, although Zhukov, perhaps then Govorov, before that Voroshilov, Kosygin used to be here.
Andrei Andreevich Zhdanov, at that time, was a member of the Politburo of the Central Committee of the All-Union Communist Party, the first secretary of Oblast.
We were interested in the role of Zhdanov in all of this siege epic. There was gossip, but this is interesting. During all of my stay at the front in Leningrad, I never heard anything about Zhdanov visiting any units or coming to the front line. I was at the Smolny once. It was for the first time in my life then, sometime at the beginning of 1942. I was summoned from the front line to get a medal. And I came here. So we came, there were about 60 of us. And first we were shown to some hall, and there was Kuznetsov. But I didn't know Kuznetsov by sight then. I was told afterwards. But I knew Zhidanov by his portraits. And he was there, delivered a speech. He looked to me to be a very fat man, very crude somehow. He spoke, but what he spoke about, this is strange. There are people who talk, make some announcements, reports, everything else, but afterwards you can never tell what it was about. And when I came back to my unit, fellow soldiers asked me, well, what was there? What did he say? Will we be lifting the siege soon? When will there be a second front? All kinds of questions like this. I could not say anything. I remember that I do not remember anything. I could tell nothing, no real things. Well, that was it. And afterwards we were taken, and I remember this well, we were taken to the dining room and they gave us dinner. The soup they served us was very thick, made with barley. Then there was kasha and a piece of meat. And then what shocked me, what shocked us all, they actually served us jelly for the dessert. They treated us with a dessert. And there was tea. And we could take some pieces of bread with us, and a sweet. I took a sweet as proof for the fellows. It was a green sweet. Yes, one does remember such petty things. When we asked the siege survivors, neither of them remembered any initiatives by Zhidanov. They mostly mentioned Kuznetsov, Popkov, who was the chairman of the Leningrad Council then. For example, Loboda, a foreman from the bread baking plant, told how they summoned him to the Smolny. They had decided on the question of switching from hearth bread to tin bread. This was a very important issue because they did not have enough flour. There was no flour. And they still needed to continue giving bread to the people of Leningrad. And they could add water into tin-formed bread, make all kinds of additives, up to cellulose, apparently. And Kuznetsov and Popkov discussed this situation with Loboda, the foreman of the bread-making plant. So they switched over to tin-formed bread. Loboda recalls that when one pressed this bread with one's hands, there was water coming out of it. But they had to give the people at least something, just to support them morally, so that the distribution of bread did not stop in the city. I imagine that Zhidanov's shiftlessness was okay with Stalin for a number of years. And in this regard, he was certainly a very convenient man to have around.
From the files of the Leningrad Party organization, January 16, 1946, Alexei Alexandrovich Kuznetsov spoke at the pre-election meeting in Leningrad. He said, one can say at the least that one of the forward detachments of the Russian people, brave and at the same time modest, energetic and at the same time not showy, is the unit of the people of Leningrad. The hardest ordeal fell onto their lot in this war, the city which destroyed the Hitler hordes by its walls, the city whose glory outmatched the glory of Troy. These words became fatal for many Leningraders.
It formally started here. From this hall, In February 1949, here, the joint plenary session of the Leningrad Oblast and the city committees was held. Malenkov came. He appeared unexpected by everybody and started his speech. Malenkov spoke fervently against the Leningrad Party organization, accusing it of opposing the Central Committee. There was almost no concrete points, all hazy phrasings, subversive activities, opposing, and other things. Historians can by no stretch pinpoint exactly what the reason was for the Leningrad case. What were the true, latent, sacred reasons for this huge wave of political repressions which rolled over Leningrad, and not only this city? There are various versions. One of these versions is that Stalin called Nikolai Voznesensky his successor, that he was already old, Stalin. His successor in the government would be Voznesensky and Kuznetsov in the party. Apparently, this was not all right, with such members of groups and party leaders as Malenkov, Beria, and Bulgarin. Intrigues associated with the struggle for power started. The struggle for power was doubtlessly the case, but it had to be furnished somehow, and this is how the so-called Leningrad case was faked. It actually started at the Defense Museum. This museum was created right after the war, in the Solino Perełki. The museum, which told the story of the defense of Leningrad and the history of the siege.
Malenkov, after having looked through the Defense Museum guidebook, declared, made an anti-party nest. They created a myth about a special siege destiny of Leningrad, downplayed the role of the great Stalin, prepared a terror attack for the occasion that Comrade Stalin would arrive.
They seized onto what? This is another classic characteristic trait of those times. That the portrait of Stalin and the portrait of Popkov, and then the chairman of the Leningrad Council during the siege, were equal in size. The management of the museum leaders and the leaders of the city were accused of these kinds of things, and the museum was shut down and actually destroyed. After the plenary session, party-related matters started expulsions of the city leaders from the party. All leaders of Leningrad and partially Moscow, because by that time, many leaders from Leningrad had been appointed to Moscow. By the time of the Leningrad plenary session, Zhdanov was not alive. His death was mysterious. So what was next?
By the resolution of the Politburo of the Central Committee, the following have been removed from their post: Alexei Kuznetsov, Pyotr Popkov, Nikolai Voznesensky, chairman of the Gosplan, Mikhail Rodionov, chairman of the Council of Ministers, Alexander Voznesensky, Minister of Education, Yakov Kapustin, second secretary of the Leningrad City Committee of the party.
And then, according to the law, the inevitable law of political repressions, the case began to snowball. They started already to seize and arrest heads of Leningrad districts, managers of plants, which were allegedly on friendly terms with Popkov, Kuznetsov, Rodionov. Without doubt, there was also another latent, secret reason which made this Leningrad case necessary for Stalin and his company. Because this case is still certainly difficult to understand. You see, here, in general, the people made liable under this Leningrad case did not have any discord either with the Central Committee of the party or Stalin. There was no disagreement with anybody. They did not even have any program of actions. They did not do or think of any opposition activities. These were people who were devoted to Stalin and the party. What was behind it all? The Leningrad Party organization was too independent during the siege. The role of Stalin was not emphasized all that much. That Leningrad imagined something of itself as if it could live without continuous instructions from Stalin and censorship and the guardianship. There was a necessity to refresh the fear of the public. To refresh the fear, do you see? There was some insane need to find new enemies, unmask them, arrange new trials. The regime could not exist without it. And so started the Leningrad case, with big trials, and then with small-scale trials, closed for the public, the idea of which was absolutely unfathomable for the people of Leningrad. Criminal cases were initiated against the formal leaders of the besieged city, not only those who stayed in the city, but also those appointed to Moscow senior positions, and those who became heads of administration in Novgorod, Yaroslavl, Simferopol, and other cities. They were arrested and brought to the Lubyanka or the Bolshoi Dom in Leningrad. Until the inquest was over, Stalin restored the death punishment for certain crimes. This was carefully kept secret from the prisoners, and they hoped for life. In camps, but still alive. One of the most horrid events of the Leningrad case happened here, in this small hall of the Leningrad Officers Club. Now everything has been rebuilt here. Here were rows of seats where the public sat. Here was the prisoners' dock. Here is where the judges sat. I was told much about this by Lev Alexandrovich Voznesensky. He had also been taken to prison. He was the son of Alexander Voznesensky. On the whole, all the Voznesensky family got under this cart. They brought the prisoners here after the tortures, agonizing tortures at the Moscow KGB. So Lev Alexandrovich told me about it, and he was told by the criminal investigator who conducted this case. What they did to the prisoners, how they tortured them. Once, Nikolai Voznesensky, no, not Nikolai, but Alexander Voznesensky, regained consciousness after extreme torture in this torture room. He saw who was sitting there watching these tortures: Bulgarin, Melenkov, and Beria. And he asked them, please, tell Comrade Stalin that I am innocent. In response to this plea, Bulgarin swore and trampled on him with his martial boots. The investigator told Lev Alexandrovich, I cannot tell you everything. If I told you everything they did to your father, your uncle, these people, you would have gone mad. In September, the main prisoners, these were Vozhnesiensky, Kapustin, Kuznetsov, Popkov, Rodionov, and others, were brought here, and here was the trial. It started on September 29th, and on the 30th, it was all over. They almost did not give them a word to say. The trial was extremely quick. On September 30th, the sentence was announced, and they were executed by firing squad. Stalin, Malenkov, and Beria were in a hurry to finish this Leningrad case.
The bodies of the executed were taken to the Levashov wasteland, an area which belonged to the Ministry of State Security, and buried there. December 14th, 1954, just here at the Leningrad Officers Club, the main hangmen of the Leningrad case were sentenced to death by firing squad. These were Minister and Ministry of State Security, Abakumov and his helpers.
The Leningrad case left a deep scar in the conscience of all Leningrad leaders, and all subsequent secretaries were under the burden, the nightmare of this Leningrad syndrome of fear and dread. And they were zealous, like mad, to do their best and prove that Leningrad is a city infinitely devoted both to Stalin and the party and the Central Committee, and that it by no means was an exceptional city. There was no such thing as its peculiarity or singularity. This was just a commonplace oblast center city, nothing more. And this wish to be like grass, to fade into all other cities and never stand out for anything, for God's sake, this was a very hard blow on the whole subsequent life of the city, and perhaps, most painfully, it affected the lives of the siege survivors. No benefits for them. We all lived here, touching upon this, some kind of quiet slaughter which was going on in the city. And this fear, induced by the Leningrad case, existed until very recently. It penetrated all Leningrad leadership, lots of Leningrad organizations. I can even sense its remains today. Hundreds of thousands of siege victims live in the Piskarovsk, the Serafimovsk, the Okhtinovsk, and other cemeteries in common graves, without a name, without a date. One would like to call everybody by name, as Akhmatova wrote. The tragedy of the siege, one of its most bitter pages, is that they left without a name. Just people who passed away nameless in the camps, and we will never know how they were dying and who they were.